We now turn to the third and final panel on net zero emission scenarios of ASEAN countries, moderated by Dr. Alloysius Joko Purwanto, energy economist at ERIA. Dr. Purwanto, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much, Ms. Lydia Rudy. Then, here we arrive at this very last session of the day. I mean, of the afternoon, and we'll discuss net zero emission scenarios of East Asia Summit countries. As we know, signatories of Carbon Neutrality Coalition launched at the United Nations Climate Summit in 2017 are committing to develop long-term greenhouse gas emission target strategies, which is in line with the objective of limiting temperature rises to 1.5 degrees Celsius. The 2018 publication of the special report of the IPCC helps us to better understand why and how to follow a 1.5 degree trajectory. The report highlighted a solution to avoid a catastrophic future, which is by reaching global net zero by around mid-century. In the International Energy Agency report of Net Zero by 2050 roadmap for the global energy sector published last May, we remarked that by the end of April 2021, 71 countries have pledged to meet a net zero emission target. These countries and group of countries account for around 70% of the global CO2 emissions and GDP. With regard to this quite burning issue, we would like to discuss in this last session the carbon neutrality targets and roadmaps in several East Asia Summit countries. We would like to listen and to discuss what is the best or the most optimal energy mix in those countries in order to reach carbon neutrality, and what kind of effective and efficient energy policies that can be implemented. We have this afternoon 4 excellent panelists. The first one will be Dr. Yuji Matsuo from the Institute of Energy Economic Japan. The second one, Dr. Saleh Abdurrahman from the Committee for Downstream Oil and Gas Regulatory of the Republic of Indonesia. The third one, Mr. Takeshi Soda of the Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry, Japan. And our last panelist will be Dr. Twarat Stobuter from the Ministry of Energy, Thailand. We will have shortly the first panelist, Dr. Yuji Matsuo, to present and to introduce ASEAN's roadmap, including energy mix to achieve carbon neutrality from 2020 to 2070, on the view of a technology assessment model applying cost minimum approach. Dr. Matsuo is senior economist and manager of the Energy and Economic Analysis Group and the Energy Data and Modeling Center of the Institute of Energy Economics, IEJ, Japan. He is also lecturer in the Energy Economics and Environment at the Sumaikan Asia Pacific University. Dr. Matsuo, time is yours.
Thank you very much, Chairman. So let me share my slides and okay. I think you can see this. So thank you very much for having and giving me the opportunity for this meeting. And I will talk about decarbonization pathways for ASEAN, and which is a model analysis, our joint model analysis with ERIA and IJ. So background is that, as Joko mentioned, due to growing concerns about climate change, many countries have set very, very ambitious GHG reduction targets by 2050, 2060. So identifying the pathways to achieve these targets will be a very important policy challenge for all countries in the world, not only the developed countries, but also the developing and emerging countries in the world. So we exploited a linear programming model that calculates the cost optimal pathways to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050 and 2070. So this, our model, what is new about our model is that it incorporates advanced decarbonization technologies, including CCUS and hydrogen and ammonia, and negative emission technologies, which include DACs and BECs. So this is an example of negative emission technologies, which is called direct air capture of CO2, which captures captures CO2 directly from the atmosphere and stores the CO2 underground. So the problem, the point is, currently it's costly at $600 per ton of CO2, but we assume that the cost will decline in the future, and which is very important for complete decarbonization of the energy sectors. So we include this kind of new technologies, and we assume four scenarios. The first one is baseline scenario, and the other three scenarios include 0, 2050, and 0, 2070, 0, 2060, 2070 scenarios, in which we assume that total ASEAN countries will be decarbonized by 2050 and 2070. And we also assume future declines in power generation costs, especially for solar PV and wind. So by 2050 and 2070, solar PV will, in terms of LCO, solar PV will be the cheapest power generation source by 2050. However, with great constellation and with intermittency of solar PV, we would not achieve 100% solar PV power generation mix, even if the LCOE of solar PV is the cheapest. And we also assess the solar PV and wind power potentials in ASEAN countries. We find that the solar PV potentials are relatively larger in ASEAN countries. However, as for wind power, the resources are very limited in these countries because of very low wind velocities. So this is a calculation result, and I'll skip several slides because of time limitation, but this slide shows CO2 emissions, which will be reach 0 by 2060, and you can also see that there will be negative emission technologies here. And this is a primary energy supply for total ASEAN countries. And on the right-hand side, the chart shows the 0 to 2060 scenario, and in which we can see that imported ammonia and imported hydrogen accounts for large share by 2060. And this is final energy consumption for ASEAN countries. So, and the right-hand side chart shows the 0 to 2060, and we can see that the share of electricity will rise from 20% to 50% by 2060, which is very important for decarbonization of energy sectors. And this slide shows power generation by 2060. And as you can see here, solar PV accounts for a very large share in ASEAN power generation mix, as there will be limited resources for wind power. And also, you can see that ammonia accounts for also large share of power generation mix because ammonia is more expensive than solar PV. But if you count the intermittent cost of solar PV, ammonia will also play a great role in the power generation mix. And this slide shows the transition from fossil fuel to complete decarbonization, in which in the first stage there will be a shift from coal to natural gas, and in the second stage there will be co-firing of ammonia and co-firing of hydrogen, and in the last stage of decarbonization there will be a 100% ammonia or hydrogen power generation. And so this slide shows that many technologies can contribute to total decarbonization of the energy sectors in ASEAN countries. And we also assessed performed several sensitivity analysis, which assumes power innovation, CCS innovation, hydrogen innovation for various kinds of technologies, and also for demand side technologies. So in which, if you assume many kinds of innovation technology scenarios, the cost of abatement, greenhouse gas reduction will be much lower than the normal case. So the right-hand side chart shows that there will be almost $1,000 per ton of CO2, which is the carbon price required for the total decarbonization of the energy sectors. However, that will decline to $500 per ton of CO2 or something like that if you assume a larger cost reduction into the future. So our conclusions are fourfold, and the first point is that energy saving and electrification in these sectors combined with low carbon power supply will be very important for future ASEAN energy systems, not only VRE, but also other carbon-free technologies, including hydro and biomass will also can play a very large role. And the second point is that during the transition periods, various kind of low carbon technologies rather than zero carbon technologies will also be very important, which includes fuel switching from coal to natural gas and deployment of more efficient turbines, and also co-firing with ammonia and co-firing with hydrogen will also be very important. And the third point is that the simulation results would imply significant economic challenges as economic costs associated with decarbonization. So the fourth point is very important. Cost reduction and international cooperation will be the key to achieve carbon neutrality in an affordable manner. So affordability should be the most important thing for ASEAN, not only for ASEAN, but also for any country in the world. So if you want to achieve carbon neutrality in an affordable manner, future research and development and cooperation with advanced economies is crucial for achieving this target. Okay, thank you very much for your attention. This is my end of my presentation.
Thank you very much, Dr. Matsuo, for your very excellent explanation and this roadmap, as well as the possible energy sources combination to be reached in ASEAN countries towards 2020 to 2070 in order to reach carbon neutrality. I have one question, a short one for you. From your modeling work, which energy technology that you consider the most crucial or the most decisive for ASEAN countries to reach carbon neutral targets?
Okay, thank you very much for your question. And this is a very good question. My answer will be that every technology is very important. So, of course, renewable energy is very, very important. However, as I explained, only if you depend only on renewable technologies, the cost will be high because of intermittency and other things. So you will also need thermal power generation, decarbonized thermal power generation, and also you will need negative emission technologies, because if you want really want to achieve carbon neutrality in the end use sector, negative technology will be very important. So my answer would be that all the technologies will be very important in the future. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Excellent feedback. Thank you so much, Dr. Matsuo. So not only renewable, but also we need to work on capturing and then abating the cost in the fossil fuel energy sources. Thank you so much. Then I would like now to move to our second panelist, Dr. Saleh Abdul Rahman. Dr. Saleh Abdul Rahman is a member of the Committee for Downstream Oil and Gas Regulatory Body of the Republic of Indonesia, and he is a former senior advisor for environment and spatial planning of the Indonesian Ministry of the Energy and Mineral Resources. Prior to that, between 2017 and 2019, Dr. Saleh Abdul Rahman was the Secretary General of the Indonesia National Energy Council. He will, in this occasion, introduce Indonesian carbon neutral targets and roadmaps by 2060, and what will be the crucial energy and new energy technology to contribute in attaining those targets. Dr. Saleh Abdul Rahman, time is yours. Thank you. Dr. Saleh, you are still muted.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Pak Joko, for this opportunity. Thank you for inviting us to share some of the update that we make to prepare our net zero emission scenario. I would start my presentation with, oh, sorry. Oh, cannot. I would like to start my presentation with updated for the current situation on our energy in 2021 as part of the reference that we use in preparing our net zero emission scenario. First, I think we still have the domination of primary of the fossil energy on our primary energy mix. As you can see here, that fossil constitute around nearly 90% of our primary energy mix. And secondly, our production, oil production continues to decline. And then also we have still have some limited gas infrastructures that enable us to optimize our gas resource. While we have huge potential of renewable energy, but the utilization is low. And another point that we use as a reference when we prepare our net zero emission scenario is the fact that our electricity consumption is around 1,000 kilowatt hours per capita. This is a main concern for us. This is well below the global average of electricity consumption per capita. All of this current energy situation is part as a reference that we use to project our long-term strategy for net zero emission. This is the key reference and assumption we use in preparing our net zero emission scenarios. I also would like to thank Matsuo-san that support us in Indonesia in preparing this our long-term strategy for net zero emission. First is, I think the GDP is, we project the GDP is around 4.4 to 5.5% growth in the period of 2021 to 2060. As you see from the right-hand slide, that we will have our president vision to 2045 that our GDP will be more than $20,000 per capita as the target for Indonesia Maju or Indonesia Onward. And then population is projected to decline from 1.16 to 1.48 from 2029 to 2060. And we use the least cost approach in selecting the technology, especially on the electricity sectors. Also, the scenario we use is to optimize the domestic energy production, as well as I said before, that we follow the president vision toward 2045. This is a key reference and assumption that we use in addition to other progress on technology, especially related to the electricity sectors. Here is the result of our electricity generation and greenhouse gas emission scenario. On electricity generation, we propose two scenarios in our net zero emission program. First is the first scenario will really highly dependent, rely on the renewable energy. When we use this scenario, as you can see here, that the generation will up to more than 600 gigawatt in 2060. But I think we will reduce our emission sooner than when we use the second scenario. The net zero will be achieved, the zero emission, not zero, the zero emission will be achieved on the electricity sectors sometimes somewhere in 2058, when no more electricity generated from coal and gas. On second scenario, we still propose to have the IGCC, the coal and gas. This will reduce the capacity generation to less than 600 or around 450 gigawatt, but we still have some CO2 emission in 2060 to around 30 million tons that need to be absorbed by the natural sinks, forests, etc. On this second scenario, we only propose the IGCC and the gas power plant with the CCS. So with reference to the previous presentation, that we agree that CCS and CCUS will play very, very important role in all countries to achieve the net zero target in 2060 or 2050. And on the demand side, this is the electricity generation side. On the demand side, you see here that we still rely on gas, oil on the demand side, because not all of the consumption, like on industrial sectors and transport sectors, can be replaced by electricity. So that we still project some role of gas and oil, as well as coal on our demand side. On household sectors, we optimize the use of electric stove and city gas, while in industrial sectors, we optimize the electrification for some industries to replace the use of primary energy, coal and gas. On transport sector, we optimize the use of electric vehicle and EV, where we project in 2050 that 100% of new sales of vehicles are coming from the electric vehicles. What is the consequence of this use of gas and oil, as well as coal on the demand side? That we still have the CO2 emission to around 400 million tons in 2060 from the demand side, while in previously from the electricity generation, we can reduce the consumption on scenario 1 to 0, on scenario 2 to around 30, but in the demand side, our CO2 emission will be around 400. So if in total we'll have like 430 million tons, and this is we need to absorb using more CCS or the natural things or forest absorption. I think that's what I can share this time. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Saleh Abdurrahman. I think we have heard this very excellent presentation from you. And yeah, I have one question for you, that you have mentioned that electricity consumption per capita of Indonesia is way below the world average. So we can expect that it will potentially grow with the economic growth of the country. Anyhow, we need to reach carbon neutrality in Indonesia. There are two ways to achieve that in power plants. The first one is by shifting from fossil fuel to hydrogen or ammonia, as presented previously by Dr. Matsuo, and as well as shifting to renewable energy sources. And the other path is to deploy carbon capture, utilization, and storage. You have shown us two scenarios, for example, representing this kind of question, but which one, in your opinion, will be the most pertinent or the most decisive scenario for Indonesia? And if it is kind of transition between the two scenarios, what kind of combination and when? Thank you so much, Dr. Saleh Abdurrahman.
Thank you, Pak Joko. It's very good question. I think we cannot just select one or two types of primary energy. As you know, that the best mix is the more diverse source of energy. And I think we will use both. We will use, I heard before the presentation from some speakers on the ammonia and the hydrogen as the co-firing for the electric generation. I think we already put some scenarios on our second electricity scenarios, as I presented before. But what we are looking forward now is how is the economic impact of the hydrogen and ammonia on our, when it compete with other sources of energy like solar. So that we're looking forward actually to discuss with, especially with METI, ERIA and IEG on the scenario on how to increase the share of ammonia and hydrogen on our generation mix. On the CCS and CCS, I think as we agree with previous speakers that we even already made a scenario, and now I think we already in cooperation with Japan with METI to develop one Gundi project area in Indonesia for the CCUS. And I think we continue to prepare for the deployment of CCUS because the potential here is quite big. And I think we agree that we will optimize all the hydrogen, the ammonia, and also the CCS and CCUS. Thank you, Pak Joko.
Thank you so much, Dr. Saleh. It is very interesting to hear about these all collaboration plans that Indonesia has currently, and it is quite, promising. If those kind of collaboration can turn out to materialize, I think Indonesia is on the way to reduce and to reach carbon neutrality. Thank you for the excellent explanation. And now we will listen to the other part of the East Asia Summit countries, which is the developed countries, which is Japan. Here, Mr. Takeshi Soda will discuss Japan carbon neutrality target and roadmap by 2050, and what will be the crucial energy and new energy technologies will be deployed to reach those targets. Mr. Takeshi Soda has been serving as the Director of Oil and Gas Division and the Director for International Affairs Division of the Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry, METI, Japan. He has long-rich experience of energy and climate change policy. Prior to that, he transferred to the United States and served as the Special Advisor to METI and Director of JETRO in New York between 2016 and 2019. Please, Mr. Soda, time is yours.
Thank you, Joko-san. Thank you for having me to the great panel. And it's my honor to make our presentation to the audience at the ERIA. And then this time, I'd like to talk about Japan's carbon neutral scenario and Asia Energy Transition Initiative. Actually, both of them are very closely related to each other. As same as the other Asian countries, Japan depends on fossil fuels for most of its power supply, and also Japan lacks renewable energy potential such as solar and wind. Nevertheless, Japan will seek to carbon neutrality by 2050. Next slide, please. I will start with Japan's carbon neutrality scenario. Next slide, please. As you know, our Prime Minister Suga has already announced carbon neutrality goal by 2050 and 46% greenhouse gas emission reduction in 2030. Please see the far right graph, which shows how to achieve carbon neutrality in 2050. First, the non-electricity sector will be electrified as much as possible. For example, introduction of EV, electric vehicle. In addition, oil will be replaced by hydrogen, synthetic fuels, and biomass. In areas that cannot be electrified, carbon will be removed through plantation, DACs, and CCS. Second, the electricity sector will be 100% decarbonized by introducing renewable energy to the maximum level, as well as by using nuclear power, thermal power with CCS, and hydrogen and ammonia-fired power plants. Not to mention, the year of 2030 will be an important stepping stone towards 2050. Next slide, please. In order to achieve carbon neutrality in 2050 and 46% greenhouse reduction in 2030, the first draft of strategic energy plan was compiled in this August. Next slide, please. I'd like to share with you the key points of this strategic energy plan. In order to achieve 46% greenhouse gas reduction in 2030, we would like to do mainly three things. First, maximize the use of renewable energy until 2030, especially the current 18% of renewable energy should be doubled to 36% to 38%. Most of this increase is expected to come from solar power generation. Second, achieve maximum energy conservation. Specifically, we will reduce electricity consumption by about 10% from the current level, aiming for 930 to 940 terawatt hour in 2030. Third, nuclear power plants, which have been confirmed to be safe, will be restarted as much as possible. We would like to increase the share of nuclear from current 6% to 20 to 22% in 2030. Another area that needs attention is the promotion of innovation in thermal power generation. Specifically, we would like to achieve hydrogen and ammonia power generation on a commercial basis in 2030, aiming for 1% of our power generation mix. Next slide, please. In order to realize carbon neutrality in 2050, Japan developed the Green Growth Strategy, which is composed of intensive R&D support and financial support for 14 growth areas. For the Green Growth Strategy, 2 trillion yen Green Innovation Fund was also established. We believe that the result of R&D will be deployed promptly among Asian countries, which should be accelerate the energy transition in Asia. Next slide, please. The 14 growth sectors are as follows. First, offshore wind, solar, geothermal. Number 2, hydrogen, fuel, ammonia. Number 3, next generation heat energy. Number 4, nuclear power. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Number 5 is the mobility and battery. Number 6, semiconductor and ICT. Number 7, maritime. Number 8, logistics, people, flow, and infrastructure. Number 9, foods, agriculture, forestry, and fisheries. Number 10, aviation. 11, carbon recycling material. Next slide, please. 12, housing and building and next generation energy management. 13, resource circulation. And 14, lifestyle related industry. This is all for the our strategy towards the carbon neutrality by 2050. Next slide, please. Next, I'm going to move to the next agenda about Asia Energy Transition Initiatives we call 80. Next slide, please. As to the background of the energy transition in Asia, I want to touch upon the current trend of climate change discussions. First, the World Bank and several European financial banks have already announced their tough stance on fossil fuels. ADB is also planning to stop financing oil and natural gas field exploration and coal-fired capacities. Next slide, please. As you may know that de facto carbon neutrality goal has been changed recently from by 2070 to by 2050. This means that all countries, including developing countries, have to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050. Next slide, please. Interestingly, some European leaders insist that developing countries could easily achieve carbon neutrality by leapfrog from fossil fuels to renewables. However, I believe that this should be unrealistic, especially in Asia. There are 2 reasons. Next slide, please. First, while energy demand in Southeast Asia will grow by 60% from now to 2040, fossil fuel will still present about 80% of total energy demand in 2040. Next slide, please. Next slide. Second, the potential for renewable energy is not so big in Asia. As you can see in the slide, potential areas for renewables such as solar and wind are unevenly distributed and limited. Next slide, please. In these perspectives, at the ASEAN Plus Summit last November, Prime Minister Suga declared that Japan will fully support a realistic and sustainable energy transition in Asia. Here, the important word is realistic. Next slide, please. So what shall we do? In order to attract foreign investments, Japan believes that each Asian country had better declare carbon neutrality, even though they don't have to set a target year, and then draw its own roadmap towards carbon neutrality. We, Japan, will financially support projects and activities designated in the roadmap. As Matsuo-san presented, Japan will also support the drafting the roadmap in collaboration with ERIA and IEJ. Next slide, please. In this June, our Minister Kajiyama announced Asia Energy Transition Initiative, we call 80, which is composed of 5 pillars. First one is supporting formulating energy transition roadmap. Number 2 is the presentation and promotion of the concept of Asia Transition Finance. Number 3 is $10 billion financial support for renewable energy efficiency, LNG, CCS, and other projects. Number 4 is technology development and deployment. And number 5 is human resource development, knowledge sharing, and so on. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. And next. And next. And next. And next. The final page. Okay. So based on success of Japan and ASEAN Energy Minister meeting on June 21st, we would like to expand and disseminate the core concept of realistic energy transition among like-minded countries. In this sense, Japan will hold the Asia Green Growth Partnership Ministerial Meeting we call AGGPM on October 4th. We are inviting Asian countries, including ASEAN, the United States, Canada, Australia, and Middle East countries. We will also share the outcomes of the meeting to the G20, COP26, and other international conferences. Thank you for attention. This is all from myself. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Takeshi Soda from METI. And it was excellent and very interesting presentation because in Japan, as you have explained to us, Japan is not only taking care of the supply side, but as well as making the management and then of the demand side growth of energy. Then we see that how both sides, supply and demand, is complementary in Japan's effort to reach carbon neutrality. And thank you so much also for presenting the Asia Energy Transition Initiative. And for that aspect, I have one particular question. I think it was in relation to the number point 4 of the IET. In terms of development of hydrogen and ammonia and CCUS, we see that Japan is an advanced country in the world. How do you consider the transfer of said technologies, especially hydrogen and ammonia from Japan to ASEAN countries?
Thank you, Joko-san, for your interesting question. As I explained that Japan will establish 2 trillion yen Green Innovation Fund for decarbonization technologies such as hydrogen, ammonia, and CCS. And we will intensively promote R&D and demonstration projects. And the result of these projects will be promptly deployed to ASEAN countries. The key here is to have dialogues with industries that are actually working on these decarbonization technologies. Japan's support for the drawing roadmap should not only limit it by discussions between 2 governments, but also include opportunity to hear from the industries about the latest technology results or trends, and also prospects for the future cost reduction. We Japan would like to hold such a kind of the webinar in the near future because it has become much easier than ever. So if you are interested in, please keep an eye on the website of the ASEAN Green Growth Partnership Minister Meeting, AGGPM. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Takeshi Soda. So that the inclusion of industry stakeholders is the key, is among the most important keys in transferring hydrogen and ammonia as well as CCUS technology from Japan to ASEAN countries. Thank you for the excellent feedbacks. Okay, we arrive now to the last panelist to present the introduction of Thailand carbon neutral target and roadmap by 2065 to 2070, and the crucial energy and new energy technologies to assist that target attainment. This will be presented by Dr. Tuarat Sutabuter. Dr. Tuarat is Chief Inspector General of the Ministry of Energy Thailand. His other current positions include Board of Directors of PTT Oil and Retail Business and National Security and Dual Use Technology Center. Prior to this current position, Dr. Tuarat Sutabuter served as Director General of Energy Policy and Planning Office, EPO, from 2015 and Deputy Permanent Secretary from 2014. Dr. Tuarat Sutabuter, time is yours.
Sawadee krab. Thank you very much, Pak Joko. And thank you, ERIA and ERIN, for inviting me and inviting Thailand to present our policy towards carbon neutrality. I just have a few slides to show you. Next slide, please. The key presentations that I would like to present on behalf of Thailand is our policy considerations. I think the key issues of carbon neutrality for us is pretty much a trade-off with energy security and a possibility of trade-off to trade energy in the region. So there are 3 points that under the our policy drawing boards. First one is how can we value or how can we evaluate developments of clean energy supply domestically, or we would bank our hope on the imported supply from our neighboring country. Even though that we are lucky enough that we are surrounded by neighbor countries that has enormous supply of clean energy supply, such as Laos, PDR, and Vietnam, for example. Secondly, on the Thailand's energy drawing board, we have to base our assumptions on some technology. Sometimes we have to plan for an unproven and emerging technology, such as the carbon capture and storage, CCUS. And also, even though that we would like to plan our long-term energy planning based on the existing and proven technology. Thirdly, on our drawing boards, we have to be balanced between the existing market structure and the disruptive force of a new technology. This is all about the oil and gas industry and the automobiles industry. Because if we transform unprepared or too quickly, we probably destroy our own self. So we have to have a balanced policy on these particular issues. Next slide, please. First of all, I would like just to touch upon our status quo and the existing plan that Thailand has. Right now, Thailand emits approximately 350 plus million tons of carbon dioxide equivalents per year. This is number back in 2016, which is a baseline for our NDC. But however, this is significantly drop from our previous projections, because we used to project that by 2030, Thailand should emit up to 555 million tons of oil equivalents. But due to COVID and other re-evaluation of our GDP growth, at the moment, our action plan based on our NDC at 2030, projecting that Thailand would emit approximately 398 million tons of carbon dioxide equivalent per year by 2030. And we have made some assumptions. This is very rough assumption, and it's not official yet. But our assumption is the carbon emission of Thailand would peak in 2030, and then will gradually reduce to the net zero year or net zero level by 2060 to 2065, in which we would see that the total carbon emission would stand about 383 million tons of carbon equivalent. But this is based on the existing technology. But if we can cut more technology, we can cut more emission from emerging technology, and we can absorb or using a negative carbon technology in which we need to combine with our reforestation plan. We need the negative carbon technology that could absorb up to 69 million tons of carbon dioxide equivalent by 2060. And you can see that most of the cut would be from the energy sector, and we will projecting to cut emission by 52%. Next slide, please. So on our drawing board at the moment, you can see that we will peak at 2030, and then for the next 3 decades, from 2030 to 2060 or 2065, we need to cut greenhouse gas by 52% from every sector. But the sector that have to bear the most load will be the energy and transportation. All of them need to cut by 52%. And I would like to raise the carbon sink technology at the moment, similar to what Dr. Saleh from Indonesia presented, that Thailand has only one negative carbon technology on the planning process, which is reforestation. So CCUS would become very important and critical for our planning for the next 30 years. Next slide, please. So from our considerations to cut 52% from 2030 to 2060, what do we have to do? There are a few questions that we need to find some analysis to answer ourselves. And with help from METI Japan and IEEJ and ERIA, we hope that we can work together to answer all these questions. First question is about the carbon neutrality versus energy security. The first question would be about, would there be more importation of the power from neighboring country? Would that be restricted only hydropower, or would it be open for other type of clean energy, including solar and wind, for example? And the second question about on this is how much Thailand can produce renewables energy supply domestically. Can we base on just the normal suspect like solar and biomass and biofuels, or can we have another advanced technology or emerging potential, such as offshore wind, for example? The second consideration is about the technology of proven technology versus unproven one. There would be a few questions need to be answered. The first one is how much advanced energy efficiency technology that can we rely on to cut it down from industry and the grow up of the urbanizations. This concept of smart grid, how much energy that we can save. Second would be anticipations of the more carbon sink technology such as CCUS. Thirdly, we would like to anticipate more of hydrogen to become the emerging fuel supply, and we would like to have it mixed with our natural gas, especially in the fleet of the combined cycle power plant that we already have. And last but not least, we are anticipating the next generation biofuels, especially that we do hope that the jet fuel will remain a liquid fuel for us for the next 3 or 4 decades. Jet fuels the tourism industry in Thailand, so we need to make sure that it stays with us. Thirdly, how can we soft landing or soft penetrating the disruptive force of new technology or new market? We have to think about introducing biomass pallet that is linked to our reforestation plan, to replacing coal usage in the industry, and also last but not least, in the automobiles industry, that how fast or how soon the electric vehicle could be gradually replacing the ICE vehicle. Remind you that Thailand, similar to Indonesia, is one of the ASEAN hubs of automobiles. We exporting a lot of ICE cars to many regions to the world. So we would like to stay put with the demand from region. If all those regions needs ICE cars, we will produce ICE car. If all those regions needs electric vehicle, we will make sure that we can produce the electric vehicle as of the market demand. And that would be my presentations. Thank you very much. Back to you, Pak Joko. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Torat. It is very interesting to hear excellent explanation from you about the philosophy of energy policies in Thailand that emphasize the importance of developing domestic energy supply, as well as to keep the balance between carbon neutrality and energy security, and as well as between the well-established conventional technology and the disruptive effect of new technologies. I have one question for you, Dr. Torat. The import of electricity from neighboring countries, which is generated from renewable resources, should make a good way to achieve carbon neutrality in Thailand. But unfortunately, this would make also energy supply security of Thailand that you have mentioned rather vulnerable. How do you see this? Would a shift from the bilateral trade with the neighboring countries to multilateral trade in the framework of ACMEX, for example, make some differences? Please, Dr. Torat.
Yes, thank you, Pak Joko, for your questions. Yes, I do believe that if ASEAN or Greater Mekong Sub-Region, GMS or ACMEC, can become a regional market, a seamless integrated energy market, I would think that would be a win-win situation. A win-win would mean we can create a regional market without compromising energy security. It would mean that the country within this region can share and optimize resources and the market power. For example, Thailand has the market power. Singapore, Malaysia also has a market power. But our neighboring country like Laos and Myanmar, or in case of Vietnam, has some excess electricity. They can sell to the market and let the market force take us to develop the projects. So I do believe that the multilateral trade with a firm infrastructure, such as ASEAN Power Grid, that link countries in the seamless way, could be answer for the short and immediate future. So I'm very much the advocate of ASEAN Power Grid for many years. I do hope that this particular project could become the anchor of the carbon neutrality policy in the region.
Thank you so much, Dr. Torat. So we have seen here there is no question from in the question and answer box, but I have several questions here. Yeah, probably to Dr. Torat first, as you are still here. If Thailand will shift to electrification, such as electric vehicles, electricity demand will be increasing, of course.
Yes.
Then Thailand will need more solar PV, hydrogen, and ammonia. Will that be fine for Thailand?
Well, it could be a first cut of the answer in the bigger scope, but you know, for sure, Thailand would have more solar rooftop and solar technology to be propagated everywhere, because we have a lot of sunshine, and we have a plan to upgrade our infrastructure, especially the low voltage distribution line, because if we have a lot of solar rooftop, you know, the consumer would become a prosumer, which can produce and put electricity to the grid. And we need to strengthening our low voltage distribution line to make sure that it is an active and adaptive grid. And we already have that plan. So we already anticipating more penetration of solar energy into our grid. And for hydrogen, we have aspiration goals to use hydrogen as the mixture with our natural gas, because from our analysis, natural gas still a bridging field from here to the carbon to the peak year. And then we already invested a lot of money in our combined cycle, natural gas combined cycle power plant. So we do believe that hydrogen would become one of the answer to bridge, to mix between the fossil fuel and renewable energy fuels, and taking the advantage that right now we have surplus electricity. If we can turn that surplus electricity into a hydrogen in some kind of form, we make sure that that can be used in some of our natural gas combined cycle fleets. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Torat, to hear this very interesting and promising progress of Thailand. And
indeed,
yeah, I have other questions for Dr. Saleh. I hope Dr. Saleh is still there. Dr. Saleh Abdul Rahman, yes. I have one question. How do you evaluate capacity of carbon sink by reforestation, for example, in Indonesia? Because you have also shown us that forests have a natural capacity of carbon sinking, and in your presentation. Could you explain a little bit more about this? Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Joko. It's very important question too. I think our colleague from Ministry of the Environment has made an inventory on the potential of the carbon sinks. And recently, we will add some new data on the mangrove potential. We hope that by 2060, that they can absorb most of the emission generated from energy sectors, as I presented before, that we project to emit an amount of, say, 400 million tons. And I think given the fact that many land use already happen now in our country, so I think the number of the capacity, natural absorption capacity, is decreasing. So that we are looking more now on utilizing the CCS from our depleted oil and gas reserve. That's what we will do to make a certainty on the number of the emission that we can absorb from energy sectors. That's what I can answer, Pak Joko. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Saleh Abdul Rahman, for the excellent feedback. I will ask then my last question to Mr. Soda and Dr. Matsuo. For both of you, what will be the role of carbon tax for ASEAN countries in your view, in your opinion? Because, for example, Indonesia is now campaigning or starting to discuss seriously a roadmap to implement carbon tax, and probably as well as the other ASEAN countries. Yeah, can you please give me your opinion or your view? Maybe Dr. Matsuo first.
Okay, thank you very much for the question. In my opinion, yes, carbon tax may be efficient, but it will not solve all the problems, because our modeling analysis would imply that at least a modeling analysis would imply that in order to achieve carbon neutrality, the carbon marginal abatement cost, which is equivalent to carbon price, would may rise up to $700 per ton Celsius. So that is very, very, very high carbon price. So that is not realistic. So carbon price may be efficient, but also it is clear that we would also need other measures to reduce carbon dioxide emissions. So that is not all what we need. That is maybe my answer to that, your question. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Matsuo, and for the excellent feedback. Mr. Soda, can I have your opinion?
Yeah, thank you, Joko-san. As Matsuo-san mentioned that to achieve carbon neutrality in the area and IEG's analysis, the carbon price will be become hugely, so expensive to achieve by 2060, 2070 or something. So in that sense, we have to, not only to, set the kind of the carbon tax, but also, facilitate the innovation. That kind of is really important. For example, like the cost of CCS or cost of the hydrogen or ammonia, to reducing these kind of costs would be very important because it's a kind of like how do you say trade-off, the carbon tax and also the cost or cost of these kind of the decarbonization technologies. So this is my opinion.
Thank you so much, Mr. Soda. So yeah, innovation to reduce technological costs is the key. So for the last part of this discussion, I would like to have your one or two last sentences as policy recommendation to achieve carbon neutrality in ES country. Maybe I can start with Dr. Matsuo.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. So my opinion is that I think that affordability is what we should consider, because there will be very huge cost related to deployment of advanced technologies if you really want to achieve carbon neutrality. So that would mean that technology development will be very important in the future to reduce the cost related to developed technologies, and which in turn would imply that international cooperation will be the key to achieve carbon neutrality in the long term. That is my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Matsuo. And maybe Pak Saleh, Dr. Saleh, can you please deliver your one or two messages?
Thank you, Pak Joko. I have 2 points, short point. Number one, I think the role of technology is more and more crucial, so that collaboration is very much needed between ASEAN countries, especially Indonesia and Japan, on doing some joint research on new technology, CCUS, fuel ammonia and hydrogen, as well as on existing technology like geothermal, to find the best exploration or geoscience technology that can make the price cheaper. Secondly, I think how to collaborate, and as Japan have the IT budget that can be used by ASEAN countries to develop our net zero emission technology development like hydrogen, ammonia, and we hope that budget cooperation can be can be implemented very soon. Thank you, Pak Joko.
Thank you, Dr. Saleh Abdurrahman. Now maybe Mr. Takeshi Soda.
Thank you, Joko-san. I believe Japan, ASEAN is on the same boat in the sense that we are highly dependent on the fossil fuels, and also we have a little potential for the renewable energy. So in order to achieve carbon neutrality in the future, even though our goal is the same, but the pathway to reach it and also the timing to achievement should be different. However, in the process, we should exchange opinions and cooperate with each other. We, Japan, would like to contribute as much as possible in terms of finance, technologies, and human resources in order to reach our goals as soon as possible. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Soda. Dr. Tuarat, can I have your last recommendation?
Thank you, Pak Joko. I think I have two short words for carbon neutrality going forward for ASEAN country. First of all, carbon neutral, it will be a transition process. It will be a gradual transition process. So the mindset of the leadership is very important because we need to set a goal and move things forward in a collective manner. And the second issue is the, as I mentioned, is a collective effort of every sector in the country. So we need some kind of a collaborative efforts within the country to make sure that things can go according to the plan. Either it's the private sector, government sector, or the people sector. International collaboration would be another stimulation that could help stimulate the efforts going forward more quickly. Thank you, Pak Joko.
Thank you so much, Dr. Tuarat. So I would like to close this very interesting and excellent panel discussion number 3. Then we have heard that several points. Affordability is the key to reach, and technology is the key to reach carbon neutrality, as well as collaboration in terms of technical, financial, human resources. And then we also heard how collective effort between countries that include intersectoral collaboration should be promoted, and to have dialogue and continuous exchange of opinions and experience will be precious to reach carbon neutrality. Thank you so much for all the 4 excellent panelists and for the questions and for the answer. And I quit back to Ms. Lydia Rudy.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Purwanto, and to all of the esteemed speakers for sharing your knowledge and insights on net zero emission scenarios. We greatly appreciate your contributions.